Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we know that in economics, we're dealing with scarcity, unlimited wants and needs, with limited resources. We know that what we're trying to accomplish is better overall welfare of the people of the globe, greater wealth, greater health, greater satisfaction. We know that rule number three is that every choice that is made has a cost. And we looked at last time the difference between an explicit cost, which is like the money you pay, and implicit cost, which is more about trade offs. And in economics, we really deal with these implicit costs. And we're going to talk about this first implicit cost up here, the idea of the opportunity cost. One of the most important parts of understanding economics, understanding the concept of a trade off and an opportunity cost. Now, we go back to the question, what is the cost of protecting the environment? Well, the common answers you'll get are like millions in government funding, higher prices on gas and trash and pollution and all these different things. We know that these are explicit costs because they reference things like prices, they reference things like money. So then we have that common temperature, the common metric that we can see when people use dollars and a price in something. We also sometimes get this, it costs you nothing. I mean, you can do nothing. It doesn't, there's no cost. If you're not paying anything, it must be free. Your actions are free. And of course, in economics, we know that there is no such thing as a free lunch. Thank you, Milton Friedman. There is no free lunch. In economics, there is no F word. There is no free. Okay. And people will try to reference that over and over and over again. It's free. And no, anytime you make a choice, there is a trade off, there is a cost. That's the implicit cost. It's what you sacrifice when you make a decision. That's also a cost. It's just the implicit. And so this is what we're going to be looking at. You know, when you ranked your societal issues, and my perfect society is going to look like this, realizes that you might say, well, it would cost our society nothing to do these things. But if you prioritize one thing, you're sacrificing the other thing by prioritizing it more. And that's what we really need to get into and understand. So when you simply say, just go outside, hang your clothes, don't use your dryer, it'll use less energy. And there's no trade off there. Of course, there's a trade off there. It takes time, it takes energy, it's more work. I could be doing something else. There's a trade off to that. Oh, simply walk, bike, or take public transit. All these things have trade offs. You know, I live 3 miles from the school. I could bike, but there is a trade off to that. It takes longer, it's more energy, I get sweaty. Okay? Buy electric cars. Electric cars are a trade off to gas powered cars. Grow your own food. Okay, well, that sounds great, except that means I have to work more at growing my own food. And the trade off is I can't do other things that I want to do. Eat less meat. That's great. I like meat. Trade off is I don't necessarily get food that I like. I don't know if I like that trade off. You should recycle and use less plastic. That's fine. But the trade off is that there's a lot more energy being used into recycling. And plastic's pretty convenient. I go to a store, get a plastic bottle. It's already there for me. You should travel less, but I like to travel. I like to see things. That's kind of like my jam. So there is a trade off. Has nothing to do with price at all. Buy from more environmentally friendly companies. Okay, what if I don't like their products? What if I found a company that's not environmentally friendly but has better style? Okay. So there's all kinds of trade offs to dealing with the environment. Even just the act of speaking out costs nothing. Well, if I speak out more in support of climate advocacy, that means I'm not speaking out about something else, or I'm not doing something I would rather be doing. Maybe I'm losing friends because I'm supporting certain climate advocacy too much. These are all examples of potential trade offs. Now, when we get into economics, what we really get into is the opportunity costs, which is what you actually did give up. What will you or did you give up when you made a choice? Because remember that when you make a choice, there is a list that's infinity of things you could have been doing. But in economics, I want to know what you actually did give up. What's the value, both explicit and implicit, of the next best alternative? It is the most important concept of economics because then we can start associating value to things individually and societally. Because if you give up something and a lot of other people are giving up something and your trade-offs are similar, we can start to, you know, work with that human behavior and get more people making what we would consider better choices. Remember, every choice out there has a cost, and the next best alternative, the thing you gave up when you made a choice, that's the opportunity cost. Okay? So, when you make a decision, you have the choice, which is the decision you chose, and the opportunity cost, it's the value of the best alternative not selected, meaning your second choice. Not what you could have done, it's what you would have done. And this is why it makes it much harder to measure than just like, oh, um, I didn't spend the extra $5. Now I have $5. But if you choose a choice that's implicit, trying to measure what you gave up gets a little more challenging. Okay. So when we get back into, okay, how do we look at, opportunity cost, you know, so we have our $40 million, you would just simply say, well, 40 million goes into, something like transportation um, or into children or something like that. Well, that's a number we can measure, and it gets a little harder when you get things like children versus fossil fuels. But understand, when we're dealing with opportunity costs, it gets a little deeper, because now if we're going to decide that we're actually, children, you want children around because children actually help create innovation, economic growth, future employment opportunities through entrepreneurship. But if we're looking at opportunity costs, let's take a look at the fossil fuels. The question of $40 million going to fossil fuels to create heat and electricity, that's only half of it. Now you need to analyze, okay, I didn't put that $40 million into deforestation. What's that impact going to be? Not just the 40 million going to fossil fuels, but the fact that I didn't put the 40 million into deforestation. What kind of impacts are that going to have? And that's what you're dealing with opportunity cost. Now, I could have put it in any of these things. I chose to put it towards fossil fuels. My opportunity cost is deforestation. So I got to look at the positives here, but I also got to look at the negatives of my choice, and that's where it gets difficult. Okay, so opportunity cost would be like, should I go to school or do my second choice? That's an example of an opportunity cost. If you own a food truck, should I put it at 1000 Low Gap Road at Ukiah High School or my second choice? Because both have costs and benefits, and I need to understand that. Okay. Should I focus my business on online sales or whatever my second choice is? Building one store, two stores, three stores, four stores, that kind of thing. What are the costs and benefits of both things? Should I give money to Ukraine to fight the war against Russia or my second choice? Because there's costs and benefits to both choices. We get into government and politics, the primary choice a country makes is, do you put your land, labor, capital, and your entrepreneurship towards the military or towards civilian goods and services? And this is the idea of guns and butter. So every country has X number of limited land, labor, capital. They have X number of entrepreneurial activities, and they have to make that choice. Are you going to produce more goods and services for the military, guns, or more goods and services towards civilian goods and services, that being butter? So before any country can really go about how it's going to develop its society, it needs to divide its factors of production between these two entities. Remember, guns, military goods and services, butter, civilian goods and services. And people wildly, like, you know, overestimate how much goes into the military. But you do got to decide as a country where this is at. The amount of scarce resources should go to guns versus the amount of scarce resources to go to butter, because there's going to be an opportunity cost. If you put a lot into one, you can't put those resources into the other. Now, how do we measure a statistic like that in the real world? We do that through the gross domestic product. This is the total monetary value of finished goods and services produced in a country. It measures the economic well-being. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. We're going to look at other measurements of economic well-being, but it's the most widely used measurement in the world. Everybody, all around the world, people look, and if you have a higher gross domestic product, GDP, then you've got usually economically, you're a better off country. Lower, a worse off country. So you take the total monetary value of all finished goods and services in a country That gives you your gross domestic product. This is kind of the measurement of all the goods and services you're making with all of your resources. If we actually take that overall number, GDP, and we take a look, okay, what percentage of the gross domestic product, what percentage of the monetary value of everything you produce in a country goes to the military, goes to guns? People think the United States is some kind of military, like, massive military industrial complex. Only 3.4% of our overall gross domestic product, everything we produce, goes to guns. Russia's currently at war, they're at 6%. The UK, 2.3, Iran, 2.1. Down here in Mexico and Nigeria, they're less than 1% of their overall, everything they produce, the monetary value of everything they produce goes to the military, goes to guns. That means that here in the United States, over 96% of everything, all resources we have, goes to civilian goods, butter. Okay, that's the opportunity cost. But that means that 3.4% of our resources can't go towards civilian goods because they're being used for butter. And in Russia, 94% of resources can't go to the war effort because they're being used for civilian goods. Of course, the more you're at war, the more you'll start eating into that. And if you're taking a look, by the way, what was the largest, like during World War II, the United States was still only about 30 to 40% of all resources were going to the military. So, results of a decision: you have your choice, what you eventually choose. You have your opportunity cost, which is the value of the next best alternative you didn't select, that being your second choice.